Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. It is I, Emily Sophia, aka Mighty Sophia, here to break down for you guys Better Late Than Never, the latest episode of Better Call Saul. We are on Season 3, Episode 6, Off-Brand. So, spoiler alert before I dive into the mad thick of things, as I shall be endeavoring to bear all in this review, and just bear in mind, in case I happen to miss a topic or misconstrue some information, this video is just the beginning of the conversation. So, bring up those things down yonder in the comments and we shall chat it up there. So, this week, family ties are tested and brands are broken. As Jimmy and Chuck try to find themselves apart from one another, Jimmy tackling the glamorous, tacky world of local advertising and Chuck the era of electricity, Nacho finds himself torn between the cartel and his flesh and blood. No thanks to the jealous, short-sighted Hector Salamanca, who is gonna get his comeuppance someday, and perhaps not from who we would have expected before. Meanwhile, Mike is trying to do right by his daughter-in-law, who believes with every fiber of her being that he earned his son's praises, while Jimmy tries to do right by Kim and keep their two-practice office afloat, all the while sashaying his way into suspension and the rebirth of his former and future self, Saul Goodman. So, we also get a glimpse behind the curtain of Nacho's tough facade, where he arbors his father and his upholstery business, and watch Jimmy wriggle his way into a new facade entirely. Even Chuck's first act on the other side of his brother's hiatus is to overcome his debilitating illness, if that is in fact his actual plan. Because every time I give him the benefit of a doubt, I know that he's going to take advantage of my empathy, and so I'm very wary of that stuff. But at this stage in the game, we're slowly watching people become who they are going to become. And we understand why they are becoming as well. One rivalry gets a little room to breathe, though the cleaving of brothers sets some pretty profound changes into motion, and then there's another one heating up, and that's catching Nacho and his unsuspecting father in the undertow. So, episode begins with Don Hector Salamanca pouring himself a cup of black coffee, and Nacho is counting some cash from a street dealer. Everything checks out. And then another gentleman enters the restaurant, and he's, dressed for work. A Tampico furniture outfit from his pop's shop. And he enters the premises smiling and courteous, and it is none other than Domingo Molina, aka Crazy 8. So if you guys recall, little Breaking Bad history lesson for you, Crazy 8 is the one who survives Walter White's phosphine gas explosion in the RV back in the day, and then he gets chained up in the basement of Jesse's house until Walt kills him with a bike lock. And then his cousin Emilio, of course, got dissolved in the bathtub. It was good times. So, this is all long before then. And Nacho tells the guy to have a seat. Domingo's attempting some small talk, more like stall talk, as I like to call it. As it turns out, one of his proteges got spooked and ditched the illicit goods. So, he's come up a little bit short. Domingo tried to compensate, but no luck. And initially, Nacho says, I'll give you another week. But then that's when Hector comes in. He's like, oh, who's working for who? So this sets Nacho into motion, and the command is loud and clear. The camera is kind of lingering on the unruffled Hector as Domingo learns a very violent lesson about what it means to pull your weight when your underlings scatter. Take some responsibility. So next we find Nacho in his father's dimly lit upholstery workshop. He stitches himself into his handiwork and slowly pulls the needle out, just barely flinching. A little foreshadowing there, of course, like it's as if his hand is what ties him to his family. But the Salamanca drug ring is the needle that pulls the thread and ends up forcing his hand in unsavory ways. So then we go back to the courthouse and we see a nervous Rebecca riding shotgun in a taxi, no doubt bound for her ex's electricity-free abode. And Kim continues to tirelessly and passionately represent her partner in crime, playing up his positive qualities and how his only blood living blood relative ultimately abused those qualities. So we cut back and forth between Jimmy's trial and Rebecca's fruitless visit. And then Kim says, of course, that Jimmy is more than prepared to face the consequences, but the whole destruction of evidence thing, that's not going to fly on her watch. It categorically did not happen. And then Rebecca's begging Chuck to let her in, and he's cowering on the floor, and then Kim makes the declaration that, yes, the legal community is, in fact, better off with Jimmy. Unfortunately, the intoxicating guise of Saul Goodman may very well put the nail in Jimmy's coffin before he can keep on doing right for his geriatric fan club. So the time comes to pop the bubbly, and, you know, here's the next 12 months. Jimmy is bound for sainthood, he's sure. And so they're, you know, the pair is celebratory and frisky, sipping champagne out of coffee mugs in the office, and, you know, it's all good, man. But, you know, matter of Jimmy's clients is still up in the air, but he doesn't care to linger on the worries of tomorrow. And then along, of course, comes a distraught Rebecca to inform Jimmy that Chuck is not answering the door. To which he says, I've already kicked in my door for the year. And she asks him to come out with her to gain entry into Chuck's den of despair and make sure that he's okay. And she says that Jimmy owes him, but Jimmy is not budging on this matter. And now she's starting to feel the betrayal and see why he really called her to come back to Albuquerque. And she tells him that it's time to do what's right. Bit of a Chuck-ism there, I think. But Jimmy thinks he's made more than his fair share of sacrifices. The felony, of course, be damned. The brotherhood, in his eyes, is effectively over. And then Rebecca says that Chuck was right about him all along and that he's mentally ill. And what's Jimmy's excuse? And then tells him to enjoy the champagne and storms off. She's right to call him out in a sense, but Chuck's remained lucid enough to weaponize his condition. I don't think that his excuses would hold up either, honestly. So we get to see Stacy at a support group, maybe for survivors of fallen officers or deceased family members. I couldn't exactly tell. But the camera does the slow 360 pan, capturing the faces of the other meeting attendees. And then as we circle back to Stacy, we find that Mike is in view. And she thanks him for coming with her and then informs him that he's been volunteered to pour concrete at a new playground. And then she starts talking about Maddie's memories of Mike. And she says, the way he talked about you, it was like you hung the moon. And, you know, yeah. So Mike is still in his family's good graces, keeping up that facade. He's staying on brand in a sense. Elsewhere in Albuquerque, a determined Howard Hamlin drops in on Chuck in his habitat of hermitage, and Chuck begrudgingly surfaces, and Howard comes bearing a wooden box with some fancy 35-year-old Scotch whiskey, and Howard tells Chuck about Jimmy's 12 months, which is cause enough for celebration in his book. What he says is that 1 year may very well turn into forever based on the likely assumption that Jimmy will slip up. Chuck is now at a crossroads. And in Howard's eyes, Jimmy is not worth his energy. The future awaits, and the future alone needs his time and intellect, not the able to Chuck's cane, if you understand the reference there. So Chuck takes a whiff of his drink and he breathes. He's been silent this entire time, and then he offers a toast to new beginnings, apparently. So once alone, he takes another swig of liquor and then exposes himself to the batteries from his tape recorder. He's clutching it in his fist and fighting back pain, and this is the beginning of his very unorthodox treatment plan. I don't know if he is trying to purposefully push himself or if he's actually trying to get better. He's so freaking conniving that I can't even tell anymore. So we'll see what actually becomes of that, whether it's a scheme or an honest attempt to break good. So then there's this really cute scene where Jimmy's looking in his aquarium. He's like, swim, honey, get it before it's soggy. Doting fish father James McGill. So it's the very beginning of a long day on the landline, and he and Francesca start calling up his clients about his year-long sabbatical. It's fond farewell montage time, and we get all these cute little clips of conversations. He's like, now you give that nephew a hug for me, niece. Oh, it's just a technical, it's an agreement thing. I'm including the calico, and just like all these fun little tidbits are stitched together. And then it finally comes down to the last client, Mr. Yellowitz. And Jimmy's ready to rattle off his increasingly streamlined spiel when the man, the purported pilot of the B-29, recognizes Jimmy, of course, as Jimmy from TV. And it's a tough note for Jimmy to end on, and it also reminds him that Gimpy Jimmy is still a presence in the local media. So he calls up the local TV station and demands to speak with somebody who can wipe his advert from the Albuquerque airwaves. But turns out this is the beginning of something new. So we find Jimmy propped up against the glazed glass wall at the office, taking a smoke break, and he's looking over his KWBV contract, and turns out he's got 9 airings left. So at that point, Kim shows up and she asks Jimmy what they're going to do about Francesca and the office space, for that matter. Kim has need of neither, you know, she's just trying to be pragmatic at this point, but Jimmy reacts incredibly dismayed, seeing this space not only as an investment in their practices and their dreams, but I think their relationship too. And he feels that this space tethers him to Kim in a way quite unlike anything else. And he says, as far as I'm concerned, nothing's changed, and he promises that he's going to keep up his half of the bargain. Preserving what they have means everything to him, and maybe having his debts will keep him from diving off the deep end sooner than he would otherwise. It's kind of hard to tell. And I don't think that Jimmy is even fully aware of what all of this means to him at that point. But the next day, Jimmy reincarnates himself as a commercial cat with 9 primetime spots to sell. And he goes from offering the owners of this local flooring business all 9 of his airtime openings, a steal of a deal, and then he drops it down to the, quote, toe in the water package of just, you know, a measly single slot. He gets a solid maybe, but judging by the fact that they'd have to start shooting in the next 15 minutes, they might need to cut down the timeline of deliberation. And I just love Jimmy's expression because he's trying to be so forbearing and just like, I don't want to scare you off, I just want to rope you in. And that is his nature. So, you know, he's got the hired help on the clock, and he's low on time to share his airtime love. He's got to dole this stuff out quickly and make a return on that investment. And then a crestfallen Jimmy comes back for his band of merry camera-toting millennials, but all is not lost. Why can't he make a commercial? Not for the thing he would normally make the commercial for, but he's got a knack for the trade. So the 4 take off in Jimmy's Beatermobile and return to his old stomping grounds to make an ad about making ads. It's kind of unprecedented territory, and for once we see Jimmy falter in his tracks. Because for him, the turn feels disingenuous and off-brand, of course, hence the episode title. But the bright-eyed, beret-wearing production assistant tries to put the wind back in his sails. And this prompts Jimmy to try and start passing off his lines on her, only to discover, no, she's not the president of the drama club, but the treasurer, so not quite as qualified as he would have thought. And then neither of the other film crew members are of any help whatsoever. So it's time to get creative to new beginnings and rebrandings. So next we get to see a day in the life of a Los Pollos Hermanos truck, and baby, this set of wheels is fully loaded. So Nacho, later we see him inspecting the product, and things take a turn for the heated when he goes in for 6 portions, not the allotted 5. At which point Nacho informs the men that Hector is expecting that half a dirty dozen. He's not settling for less. So at the scene, we find a few more familiar faces in Gus's enforcers, Tyrus and Victor, whose grotesque fates are both sealed in the future past of Breaking Bad. So Tyrus calls up his bespectacled boss, who firmly repeats the following four-word command: give it to him. Says it twice in a row, even more emphatically the second time. So guns are lowered and the tense business is uneasily concluded. Gus, meanwhile, is busy inspecting some industrial space. It's a bit of a fixer-upper for sure, but it's got real personality. Opportunity. The site of his future meth operations, in fact, it's the Lavanderia Brillante, which is the industrial laundromat and someday meth factory made famous in Breaking Bad as Gus's well-oiled super lab. It's a very, very iconic location. Excited to see that it's already making its introduction. And then who other does Gus go back to after inspecting the space than Lydia, yet another in a long line of familiar faces that have graced and blessed us over the course of the past few episodes. So, another history lesson here. She's the head of logistics at Madrigal Electromotive, and she's Gus's meth supplier. She's the one who tries to off Mike and Gus's associates after Mike refuses to dissolve her ties to the drug underworld when a certain bell tolls for Mr. Fring. And she also helps set up the train heist that ends in tragedy. Thanks, Todd. And expands Walter's stateside meth empire to the Czech Republic until he bows out of the biz, leaving her to scramble and settle again for Todd. And then she also stages a coup with Jack's white supremacist gang against meth distributor Declan, and cooks up some schemes to respectively off Skyler and Heisenberg himself, but falls spectacularly short and succumbs to a cup of rice and tea. Sweet, sweet memories. Sweeter than stevia. But that's what she's all about. I had to refresh myself too. It's been a long, long time. So, elsewhere we see Chuck going for a casual midnight stroll in a space blanket hoodie, and he heads to the neon-bathed streets downtown, trying to muscle through the electromagnetic onslaught, and then he calls up his former doctor from a payphone and tries not to pass out. This is the doctor who I believe was the one who quietly exposed Chuck's condition as psychosomatic one of the last times that he was admitted to the hospital. So I'm guessing that the whole reason why he's going out into public is to be able to access a phone, maybe, unless it's like part of his ritual, his training. There's a lot that he could be up to, and it's kind of hard to evaluate his motives. So Nacho reports back to Hector, who sincerely hopes that Gus soiled his trousers in rage, but nope, he was off hunting for commercial real estate. Entrepreneurially minded businessman that he is. So after pressing for more details, Hector changes his tune and asks Nacho about his father's upholstery business, the supply chain from Jalisco to Albuquerque, specifically. He just so happens to be in the market for a new friend himself now that the ice cream business has melted. And Nacho is none too enthused about this proposal. He says, "My father is a simple man. He is not in the business." But Hector does not give a shit. He starts telling him, "Oh, we're gonna take care of your father. He's gonna be well provided for." But then news comes in that Tuco had another meltdown. Couldn't make it 6 months without getting thrown back in solitary confinement. So, as the rash, ill-tempered old drug runner pitches a Tuco-sized fit and works himself into a near heart attack, or at least I assume that's what was going on, Nacho ends up hiding one of the pills Hector drops as he attempts to medicate his symptoms away. Just the beginning of the rebellion, no doubt. And that actually reminds me of the plate shard that Crazy 8 hides from Walter in the first season of Breaking Bad, if you'll recall. But anyway, so Tio Salamanca would do well to treat his employees with the same degree of respect that Gus extends to the people on his payroll. And maybe not infringe on an innocent, law-abiding business owner looking to make an honest living from an honest trade. I don't know. I mean, that's just my thinking. But as of this moment, it is not a stretch to anticipate that Nacho will play a role in Hector's journey to the wheelchair. So, meanwhile, Jimmy brings Kim up to speed on his master plan of making one commercial to sell off the rest of his space, working within the confines of his contract, of course, but yanking a few strings. And hey, who gets to get creative and break even all in one fell swoop? It's not all that common, you know? So he's really winning here. But it's not Gimme Jimmy anymore hitting those airwaves. Nonetheless, things are going better than expected. So Kim insists on seeing the ad heard round the ABQ, but Jimmy suddenly gets retroactively camera shy. It's not his best work, he warns her. And then along comes the bearded, mustachioed Jimmy in this Panavision cap, utility vest, and stunner shades, telling the world that they can't afford to not be on TV. Oh, such a precious gem of an ad. They'll look at you, you're a triple threat. Great services, great products, and most of all, that face! Triple exclamation point. You're a star. And then there's the better get ready to be famous, Albuquerque. And this is when it all hits us, baby. It's getting real familiar. The true star is born. The one and only Saul Goodman. Back again, but like we've never seen him before. So might he end up practicing law in Jimmy's stead? Time is gonna tell if Goodman can keep the lawyer in his pants, but can't be sure. And after the ad is over and Kim is still trying to process what she just witnessed, Jimmy kind of self-deprecatingly says, oh, the guy at the station, he said he'd never seen so many star wipes in a row. It's never been done before. And then the stunned into silence Kim, she gives her assessment of Saul Goodman, which is that he's got a lot of energy. And then comes the eventual, huh, kind of the perfect underreaction, I would say. But this is where the episode leaves us. Of course, I think in a sense, it's maybe a little less crazy emotionally resonant than the previous episode, which was just supercharged on every possible level, finally getting to reach that breaking point with Jimmy and Chuck was really cathartic, really a game changer. And so now everybody is kind of scrambling to find themselves. And I think that's pretty much the perfect direction for us to go in. Tons of cameos this time around. I saw some people saying like, oh, this feels kind of fan servicey in comparison to other episodes, but honestly, I think that the show has really held back on the fan service, and that any of this now, here in the third season, I believe is earned. I think that they are weaving things in really, really nicely to the point that Better Call Saul is quickly becoming my favorite over even Breaking Bad, honestly. It's kind of weird to think about, but it's been incredible. So I hope you guys are enjoying the season as much as I am. I would love to hear all of your thoughts, everything that stood out to you guys in this episode. Just a quick FYI, in the upcoming month, I'm probably going to be taking a little bit of a hiatus, so there may be a break from my regularly scheduled Breaking Bad or not Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul and American Gods reviews, although we've got 4 more episodes left in the season, 7, 8, 9, 10, so yeah, we'll see where the cards fall, but I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to end it here, but you guys take care of yourselves, please, and as always, I will be back before you know it.